All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Greetings from the Garden State. I'm your host, Mike Can. We have a co-host for this episode, Bill Anthes. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back.
Of course, in the leaderboard right now with 3 appearances on Greetings from the Garden State. Out of anybody else, that's the most we've ever had. So, originally you were tied with actually Kay for 2, but now you have surpassed her. And by the end of this veteran series, you will have crushed her as far as appearances on the show. So congrats on that. So big win for you today. Yeah.
It might be the only time I ever beat her at anything.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I mean, I figured I'd give you a win whenever possible. So
maybe I can get one of them hats too. Just saying.
I mean, they're $25. I do actually owe her a hat too, because I think she did pay me, but I haven't seen her to give her one, but neither here nor there. So, all right. So we're back for episode 2 of our New Jersey veteran series. So obviously, Bill, you were on with me. These 2 episodes that we're recording today are going to drop on actual Veterans Day on November 11th as kind of like bonus episodes for the show. And you did such a great job that I just wanted to have you back. So as a co-host. So since you introduced me to our guest today, do you want to introduce who we're talking to on our second episode of our New Jersey veteran series?
Yeah, sure. So we have Joe Gallo. Joe and I met. Joe's an Air Force veteran. Let him tell his story mostly, but him and I met through a few years ago. Maybe one of these online meeting situations first, through Instagram or social, and then connected in person. And yeah, just an awesome dude. I've had the pleasure of working with him in different settings and different events, and just feel like he's got a story. He's a local veteran, and I'm just fired up to have him here and share his story.
For sure. Yeah. Joe, welcome to the show, man. Good to have you.
Hey, I appreciate it, Mike. And appreciate the intro, Bill. It was actually Johnny Roth from Recalibrate USA who introduced us. And it was back in, I want to say early 2020. And then
time is back then.
We connected on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. At the time, I was doing my podcast, the Joe's to Pro Show. And I brought Bill on as a guest, and similar to you, Mike, I think he's the highest ranking guest appearance on my show. I think he was on 2 times. So
yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, he's just a stud. That's why we have him around. He wasn't. I mean, listen, the episode itself the episodes themselves have not been the highest ranked episodes of view count. I mean, I'm not going to give him that too. But he has been on enough because I just, I love episodes that don't get any listens.
Well, that's why I've been on more podcasts than I have listeners of my own podcast. So that's cool.
That's great. And one thing I did notice too is Joe easily plugged his Joe's to Pro show within the first 5 minutes of this. So that is you want to say I'm a pro?
Shameless self-promotion.
That is a pro's pro move right there. Okay. So I do want to learn a little bit about Joe because I don't know you at all. You're obviously living in New Jersey right now. Are you born and raised in Jersey?
Yes.
Take me through a little bit early life, Joe, kind of where you grew up, what your activities you were involved in, that kind of thing.
Sure. We'll do the origin story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I grew up in Middletown, New Jersey, which is it's in Monmouth County. It's in central New Jersey, which I don't know if you guys believe if that's a real thing or not, but to me it is. A lot of people say there's only North Jersey and South Jersey. But Middletown was just a very safe town. I had a very, dare I say, privileged childhood, privileged upbringing, in that I came from a very large and very loving Italian family. We were talking about a little bit before we record it. And, I had a very unique childhood in that I had 3 older brothers, and I was the youngest boy, and then I had a sister who was a year younger. And my 3 older brothers, like most kids, they were my biggest role models. And I share that because watching them and watching other men in my family, to include my father, my uncles, eventually I got really into sports and following certain athletes. I'm a big Derek Jeter guy. So anybody who knows me knows that I'm always, sharing some kind of story or some kind of lesson that I learned from watching him. But the one thing that I got as a kid that most other kids didn't have was a really strong work ethic. And so my parents were both business owners growing up. Not originally. My mom was a nurse to start. The first 5 years I was born, she was working a midnight shift. And my dad worked for Pan American Airlines for, I want to say, 16 or 17 years before they went out of business in the early 90s. And my dad kind of gambled on himself. He was a big baseball fan growing up in the 1950s and 60s. And so he decided to start a little baseball card shop.
Okay, I love that.
In Belford, New Jersey. So I did too. It was it was like the coolest thing ever. And of course, I had something to brag about when I went into school, and I had all the new cards. So it was really awesome. And then in 1994, so I'll date myself, I was about 7 years old at the time. My dad and mom kind of shifted our business, their baseball card business, into a candle business.
Which I can see the obvious progression of that. Baseball cards to candles. It makes total sense. Yeah.
Total sense. Because everybody's, lighting candles when they go to baseball games and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother story. And so, I was in school Monday through Friday. And then on weekends, I would help my parents out in different ways with the candle business, as did my older brother and my sister. Now, my 2 oldest brothers, they were much older than me. There's about a 15-year age difference. And so as I was growing up, and this is where it gets even more interesting and more unique, is they had children very young. And so my first brother, my oldest brother, George, he had 4 daughters by the time I was like 10 years old. So I was kind of figuring out my way as like the uncle, but none of them called me Uncle Joe or anything.
Yeah.
But also as like the older brother. And with growing up in the Italian family and looking up to all these strong men and, watching sports and watching guys like Derek Jeter, I was a huge WWF wrestling fan. So, I think I had very high standards at a young age, which we'll kind of get into how that played out in the rest of my life. But it was very unique. And it's something that don't get me wrong, there's been times in my life where I've gone through, some hard depression because there's certain things I didn't think I had gotten as a child.
Yeah.
But now I'm able to look back and, I was always loved. I always had a place to stay. I always had, parents who were willing to let me take risks, both before, during, and after the military. So that's kind of how it all started in Middletown, New Jersey.
There you go. I love that. So fun fact about me real fast. I was born in the same hospital as Derek Jeter, Chilton Memorial in Pequannock, New Jersey. So there you go. So it's the universe. The universe is a weird place, and there's a lot of weird shit that happens. And it's just funny that you were talking about Derek Jeter and the baseball thing. And same hospital as Derek Jeter. So there's been a lot of good, great people that have come out of that, been born there. So fun fact. All right. So the other question that I had is, obviously have, like you mentioned, your brothers were role models for you, and you have like this big family, and there's a lot of, strong men and in there and all that kind of stuff. Were there other people in your family that were part of the military? So, like, when did that, I guess, like, inkling to go down that road start for you? And then was there a reason why?
So as far as having other people in the family, I had my grandfather on my dad's side, who I was very close with growing up. He served at the end of World War II. And he didn't talk about his military experience a lot. He always had the military channel on. You know, I was spent a lot of time at his house as a kid.
Yeah.
Taking care of him, and he always had the military channel on, but he didn't talk about his experience a lot. And so what I found out later on in life is that he enlisted at 18 years old. So he was born in 1926, went in 1944, and was there right at the liberation. And so I think, you know, the story that we kind of understand is that he saw some really, you know, some really horrific things at the end, and never wanted to talk about it. But he was the only person in the family that served. I also had a cousin who was a Marine who got out 2018. And other than that, you know, that's the only military connections that we have in the family.
Right. And so then when did kind of your path? So Bill had mentioned at the outset that you're an Air Force veteran. When did that start kind of you start going down that road?
So joining the military, knowing that I wanted to do that really kind of came after 9/11. That's kind of when I started to have a focus. I was 14 years old at the time. And I just remember as soon as it happened, the town that I'm in, Middletown, we lost 37 people who worked in the World Trade Center. And unfortunately, one of them was a close friend of mine's mother who worked in the North Tower. So right after that happened, I had this calling, I guess you could call it, that I knew I was going to serve my country in some capacity.
Right.
And initially I thought I was going to be as a firefighter. And so, you know, one of the things that I always remember like rewatching over and over as a teenager was, and probably too much, you know, I was watching the news coverage a lot. And I just remember watching the firefighters and the police officers just go into the buildings. And especially after the South Tower went down, and, you know, you just put yourself in their mindset of like, they knew, I mean, there's a good chance they knew what was going to happen.
Right.
And so like the ultimate sacrifice, you know, that really started to manifest in my life at that time. And so 2007, I had a few meetings with a Marine recruiter and an Army recruiter. And the only reason I didn't enlist with the Marines, to be quite frank, was the guy who I was working with was just a little bit too aggressive with trying to get me. And, you know, not to bash Marines because that's kind of their nature. But in 2010, a few years after that, I had a friend of mine who called me up, and he told me he was going to talk to an Air Force recruiter. And he was just asking me if I would go and sit with him and kind of just listen in and support him, you know, because he hadn't told his parents yet. He hadn't told anybody else. And so I just had this natural curiosity. I was like, you know, of course I'll go, you know, and support you. But at the same time, I'm going to listen in and ask some questions and see if it's a good fit for me, you know. And at the time I was 21 years old. So, you know, similar to Bill, I know, Bill, were you 20, 24, 25 when you
when I finally went in? 25. Yeah, 25. Just turned 25.
Okay, so Bill can kind of relate. I had this unique, I think, and again going back to like having that strong work ethic as a kid. So when I enlisted in the Air Force at 22, it was a very natural fit, and especially in my career field. So I was security forces, which to most people, they know it as military police. And we did basic law enforcement at the different military installations we were stationed at. We did a lot of security. If anybody's ever driven onto a military base, those amazing people who are at the gates, who are checking your ID cards, that's probably what I did for about 50% of my career, to be honest.
Okay.
And I loved it. You know, I was in for 4 years. I love the camaraderie, you know, and most people can attest to this. Most veterans who I've met, you know, the first thing you ask them is, what do you miss most about the military? and it's always the people, and the sense of being around others who have that same willingness to not just sacrifice, but to also, it's like being a part of the biggest team in the world, like the best team, and everything's functioning so well. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff that we can bitch about, and we can, be pissed off about, working at these gates for, 12-hour shifts. And just sometimes it can seem like tedious, and, like there's no point for it. But at the end of the day, just knowing that you're alongside other humans who are going through the same experience, that's a feeling that when we get into after the military, I really struggled with, because I didn't know how to connect in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because so this is like just a different kind of story, but my accountant, who is our longest running sponsor of this show, Albert and Whitney CPAs in Denville. So I could plug stuff too. So he's a member, like a civilian member of Picatinny Arsenal, like the golf course there. And so we'll go in, and he invites me all the time to go play golf. And, we just hit a bunch of balls into the woods, and, then go have a beer and go home. But every time that I've driven my truck in, when those guys come to check, they're like, can you unlock your door? They look in the back. I always I know that I don't have anything in there, but I'm always like, shit, what if I do? Am I gonna, what's going to happen? But I always get a little bit anxious going through those gates. But, it's just that you're good. But You're like, wait, but maybe I don't. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But all right.
Dude,
so
it's the same thing with if I'm driving now and I see a cop behind me, there's still that split second.
Oh shit, what did I do?
Yeah, am I doing something wrong? Or
Right.
that natural panic.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going through. I think you said 4 years. You were in for 4 years. When you had this initial kind of, you said the manifestation of this kind of path that you were going to go down, was there and I think Bill and I kind of talked about this, when he had his initial thought, and then kind of going through his career in the military, was there a moment where it kind of hit you oh, I've finally gotten to where I think I wanted to be? Was there ever a moment that you had that during your career, or was it still trying to still trying to figure it out, still trying to chase something, not 100% sure what it was?
That's a great question. I think I have the answer to it. I think the answer was going back to that camaraderie. So growing up, I always struggled to fit in. I always struggled to be whether it was going to birthday parties or hanging out with my friends, unless we were playing some kind of game or playing kickball or, competitive wiffle ball, stuff like that. It was never an issue for me. But I had a hard time, and I still do at times, with trusting people. And so when I was in the military, I want to say it was my second year in, I had this realization where I didn't have the most friends, and I always consider myself a friendly guy, but I had 2 or 3 good friends who were there for me when shit went wrong. And, one of them kind of called me out on some of my bullshit. And, he's one of the 5 or 6 people I still keep in contact with. But it was, knowing that I could be myself around certain people. And I think the other thing too was that I got really good at my job. And I know it sounds kind of cocky, but when I was in 2011, I enlisted in 2010. So it was my second year in, I had this supervisor named Sergeant DeJesus. And DeJesus was he was the coolest supervisor ever, because he was very laid back. As long as you did your job and you did the basics right, he kind of backed off. But then something that he did that not many people had done for me in my life to that point is he kind of showed me what I was capable of doing. And I remember he came up to me one day. I walked into work, and he goes, "Hey man, I'm putting you up for Airman of the Month. And I remember like that initial fear, comes up of like, oh shit, like, why would you do that? Like, why do you think I should be Airman of the Month? And I tried backing out of it, and he was just so reassuring. He was just so like, nah, dude, you're going to be fine. You just got to do this, this, and this. And, you just got to show up and answer some questions. And I ended up showing up to the whatever it was, the board, and I ended up winning it. And that was like, holy shit. Like, and it wasn't a big deal. And, there wasn't like a whole ton of qualifications. It's actually funny because when you go and meet in front of the board, they ask you a bunch of questions about military history and your career field. And dude, if they asked me like 10 questions, I might have gotten 3 right. Like, I did not think, if anything, I thought they were going to like pull me aside after and be like, hey man, you need to like study a little bit more.
Next time, come prepared.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But the other thing with that is, you kind of earn like a respect, after that with your supervisor. And I think maybe even trust is the better word.
Right.
To where I was like, okay, I'm just going to follow this dude's lead. Like whatever he tells me to do, like I'll do it. And, within reason. So DeJesus was big into working out, and he was big into powerlifting. And so I asked him if I could start working out with him. And same thing. I saw results because I started working out when I was 19 years old, about 2 years before I enlisted. And I was kind of, I was really into the gym, but I wasn't necessarily doing everything right. I wasn't seeing the progression that I wanted to see. And so, I think what I learned was, and this is just one of the greatest life lessons, I think, for anybody, is if there's something that you want to achieve, find somebody who's already doing it or has done it, and just figure out what they're doing. And that was something that I think I was doing subconsciously.
Right.
I was just kind of like, DeJesus is really great at, our career. He had gotten promoted early and, had deployed a few times and done some cool shit. And then, he was a stud with working out and wrestling. And it was something I think without realizing it, I think this is something a lot of guys join the military is, I was looking for that direction. I was looking for somebody to kind of take me under their wing and, show me the ropes. And as much as I can talk, about the good leaders who I served under, there's a lot of things that I learned about what not to do. As a, I don't even want to say as a supervisor, but just as a human being. I've seen some people just talk to people for no reason. And in certain settings in the military, it's necessary to be more aggressive and to be direct. But at some point, you see somebody getting, razzed on or bullied for no reason, or where it's just like where it's a little bit excessive,
right?
So I learned a lot about that as well.
Yeah. So I find this interesting, and I'm not sure if Bill has any other kind of like during the military questions, but so you said that you were in for 4 years. And then early on you had you said for most of your life, kind of a harder time fitting in and trusting people and all that kind of stuff. And then you're in the military and you have something like that. Like you have people that are close to you, you're under DeJesus's wing, and you're kind of like figuring things out. What made you decide to get out? So like if you found something that was, seemingly kind of helping you and making you whole, I guess, I don't know if that's the right way to say it. But then to get out of that and go back to life the way it was prior to that.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 answers to that. The first being that I kind of made it up in my head before I went in that I'm just doing these 4 years.
Okay.
I'm going to serve honorably. I'm going to do my best and, come out of it. And my goal was to become a firefighter after the military. And I actually wanted to work in North New Jersey. And so it was a combination of that. And then when I got to my final duty station, so I started in Barksdale, Louisiana. I was there for my first 2 years. Then they gave me orders to South Korea, which was a 1-year remote tour, which was just a great time. I mean, total shit show, but
love those.
just something that everybody needs to do every now and then. Just go to Korea with a bunch of idiots with guns and just put them in a dorm
I'll jot
together.
that down in my notes. Yeah, make sure I get over there and get a gun too.
And then my final year was down in Tampa, Florida. I got follow-on orders to MacDill Air Force Base. So when I went to Tampa, I was like, all right, I knew I was going to love the beach. And I was like, all right, I kind of made a deal with myself. I know I'm going to love the area, but if I like the job too, because every base is different. And I don't know if this is the same with you, Bill, with being in the Army with your units. But again, going back to like the people you work with, if you're working in a shitty work environment anywhere or somewhere where you don't feel like you're appreciated, or you feel like you're doing work that you shouldn't be doing, or whatever it is, you're just going to you're going to be resentful, and you're going to start to not trust that leadership or the supervisors around you. Because for every Sergeant de Jesus that I served under, I think I wrote it out recently. I wrote out a list of all the supervisors I served under, and I had about 25 different ones in 4 years.
Oh, jeez.
And I circled the ones who I remembered for good reasons. And it was only 4 or 5. I know that sounds like a shitty thing to say.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, when I got to Tampa, I was like 60-40. Like, if I like the work, if I trust my leadership, if I feel like they're doing right by myself and the other young airmen and the young NCOs, I'll study for NCO, and I'll think about making this a career, at least extending for another, or
Sure,
re-enlisting for another 4 years. But yeah, that last year, without getting into all the details, it just, by the time October of 2014 came, which was my Darrow date, I was just like ready to, punch my ticket, drive back home. And I think another part of it too, Mike, is that I kind of built my confidence up in the military, like doing some of the cool shit that I got to do, and getting promoted early. So I failed out of college in 2007. When I first graduated high school, I went to Brookdale Community College, and I was a criminal justice major. And I failed out in like 3 semesters. And just talk about not having direction, or not having that support system around me. I think it was a little bit of that, and just not having my priorities in the right place. So when I went into the military, I started seeing this proof of concept of like, holy shit, when I push myself, and when I have somebody who's kind of directing me to, hey, Joe, do this, because after that Airman of the Month, it was, hey, go up for Airman of the Quarter. And, boom, knock that out.
right.
Hey, have you ever thought about going back to school? It'll look really good on your EPR, your annual performance report. Sure. I mean, I did go to school and I failed out, but, so I went back to school, and I ended up getting my associate's degree in criminal justice right before I got out. And so it was like, I had all this confidence, and this, again, I think going back to a kid and working with my dad and seeing him start different businesses, and, because eventually, unfortunately, the candle store kind of went under, and he started a new venture. But it was always seeing other people who just, they had an idea or a vision of something they wanted to create, and they just went for it, And I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of like that whole entrepreneurial spirit.
Right. Yeah.
I think I was developing it without even realizing it, because I didn't even know what entrepreneur was, or, I didn't know what hosting a podcast would be about, or, some of the stuff that I ended up doing after, but I knew I had something, and I felt like I felt like the military had just kind of, like, everything that I wanted to do was I had accomplished.
Yeah. It seemed like everything was kind of like came together at seemingly like the right time, because like if you had a great time down in Tampa, plus you were feeling like, good about yourself and like all that kind of stuff, maybe it goes a different way, or whatever. So I feel like it just kind of a perfect storm of kind of everything coming together at the right time is what it seems like. I don't know if Bill, did you have anything? I don't know if you were getting ready to ask a question.
No, I think it's, to just echo Joe's point that the, the environment has a huge influence, and it could be, it could be a few months stint, but the military is its own ecosystem, and, the environment within different, different units, different bases, different experiences, it really does, things can change fairly quickly. And yeah, I think that's something to I just think back about that sometimes too. Like, yeah, you're in a kind of different scenario, different setting, and if you have options, and people are like, hey, I'm going to explore what else is out there. What, like, why would I continue to do this? And so, leadership obviously has a huge bit to do with that, and that talent management and retention thing has always been a bit of a challenge, and yeah.
Right. Okay. So then, all right. So now we're going to do a little bit post military life now. So, you decide to leave. What were some of the initial things you said you wanted to be a firefighter after the military? What were some of the initial things that you started to do, and how was the adjustment period?
Yeah. So that first year I came out in 2014, that was, the civil service test wasn't coming out until 2015. So I had a whole year to kind of plan and prepare, both my body and my mind for this, this new role and this new career path I was going to be going down. And what I realized about 6 months into it, very directly one day, was my heart's not in this anymore. I was 28, 29 years old at the time. I was starting to feel a lot of aches and pains. I've been a meathead for the last 15 years. So, throwing weights around and trying to do things without stretching properly, it starts to take its toll. And so that's the easiest way I could say it. So I just kind of realized, like, I'm kind of tired of beating up my body and working for other people and just trading my time for money. And at the same time, I started listening to podcasts. And I was just telling this to a friend the other day, because he told me he started listening to podcasts because of Joe Rogan, recently. And I'm like, dude, that's the same reason I started listening to podcasts back in 2014, 2015. And what I really just started to do a lot more was to be more open-minded to the different career paths that were out there. And so 2017, I ended up getting into network marketing. And this is really embarrassing to admit, but I was totally that fucking guy.
I didn't want to say anything, but
yeah, man, talk about, a moment of clarity that I had recently. Because I got into network marketing. I was working with a healthcare company, and they had really good products. The products were getting my clients results.
Are you selling me right now?
No, totally. That's why I thought about mentioning their name.
I was like, wait a minute. Is that he's going to try to recruit me and Bill right here on the show? That'd be epic if you were able to pull that off. But
you couldn't even be mad if I did that. That's just impressive.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
So I did that for about 6 months or so. And same thing, there was a little bit of dysfunction going on in the team that I was a part of. And so on top of that, I didn't like the approach that they had. They were big on posting on social media, and I'll never forget one day I got tagged in like 20 posts, and I had no clue what it was about. And what happened was, every 30 days you would share your progress photos. And so I shared my 30-day progress photos. And again, I'm sounding very cocky, but I'm pretty ripped. I have abs. And so a bunch of people who worked with this company saw my results and decided to reshare my post. And basically they were trying to me, they were trying to solicit my body and my results to sell their products. And I don't know, I just kind of saw that as like kind of sleazy.
Yeah.
Like I don't like if I messaged you and you knew me and we talked a little bit and they asked me how I'd gotten my, how I had success with it, and you know what I mean? But like, I don't know, I felt like I was being used, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I kind of realized I wasn't necessarily passionate about the healthcare thing. Most of my clients, I had probably had about 20 to 25 clients in a 3-month span. They were all having like no problem with the products. Most of them were trying to lose weight or, build a little bit of muscle. And what we did was we basically sold them a 30-day accountability system where it was like, hey, here's the products. Take them on this, drink 2 protein shakes a day, eat 2 healthy meals a day, drink a shit ton of water, and you'll get results. And then it was like every week we would call them and we'd just have a conversation about how they were feeling. And 95% of those conversations were not about the products or the protein or nothing like that. They were all having good results. People would just start opening up to me and telling me about like some of their other problems in life.
Right.
And so I think without realizing this at the time either, I kind of found a sense of purpose in being that person who was there to listen to other people. At times give advice, but I'm one of those people, Mike, and I got this in the military too. Like, I don't like giving people advice unless they ask for it. You know what I mean? I'm a big believer in the more you listen to somebody and what they say, you can lead them to the answer that they're looking for,
Right.
And that's, to give a shout out to Bill, that's a big part of why I don't just admire what he's doing with BTE, with what him and Kay have built. But what he's doing is he's setting that example for me to see that not everybody needs to be told what to do, whether it's in coaching or in my relationships. Sometimes that cliche of less is more, the more you listen to somebody and you take the time to understand them, sometimes that's all a person needs, whether that's a coaching client, whether it's a friend or a family member who's having a really shitty day or past few weeks, or, they're struggling with their transition out of the military, and that's one thing that, I'm grateful as I'm talking about how embarrassing it was to be a network marketer. And I could talk about, a whole podcast episode of all the fucking mistakes I made as a business owner. I made every one, dude.
Yeah. We've all
But
made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, but I did a lot of things right. And one thing I can always hang my hat on is there's certain people that I know that I've helped in a way that, they might not have gotten from somebody else, or they weren't at the time, I should say.
Right.
And that might sound very egotistical.
No, man, it's real, and that is, I think, your point about listening to people and allowing them that space to open up, to share, to, maybe have someone that they can say something to that they don't feel they could say it to anybody else. And there's value to that. And, listening as a means of not responding, but just allowing whatever it is that needs to come up. And, those results are very real. And that's not something that any template or any, meal prep plan or whatever can guarantee. That's something the human has to do.
Yeah. I find so. I want to make sure we are getting close to like the time we need to wrap it up. We got like 11 more minutes total. But I do find it interesting, and I don't know. the more that I've gotten to know Bill and the more that I'm listening to this story and kind of how you guys are talking, I think it's very interesting. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the fact that like you both come from military backgrounds and then basically like almost similarly, um, saying that like people don't always need to be told what to do, which as a civilian looking at the military, that's like a direct, like the total opposite of kind of what you've almost been conditioned to over your time in the military. So is that like, I mean, maybe it's even just kind of like a question for both of you. Sorry if that came through the mic, but like the I guess you talking about your days in network marketing, kind of doing that and realizing that the more you listen, the more you get to learn about somebody and how you can help. But I think like to me that's very interesting, kind of going from a place where it gave you like a lot of purpose and a lot of meaning and kind of helped kind of get you where you are, and then almost going like a different road to how you are now trying to help people do whatever it is that they're doing. I don't know if there's even a question in there. I just wanted to make sure that I said that was interesting.
I'll tell you a quick story, and it's going back to the military, and this is one of the most profound experiences of my life that kind of first got me to start thinking about what we're talking about with listening more. So when I went in the military, 2 months of Air Force boot camp, again, I'm very, very arrogant, but it was very easy for me physically. The mental thing was the problem with me. And going back to like, if I don't trust you as a leader or as whatever you're trying to sell to me, whether you're telling me to do 20 push-ups or to put that machine gun together in 30 seconds, like I'm still going to do it. But after that, if you tell me to do something else and I don't have your trust, if I don't trust you or I don't appreciate how you're telling me to do things, then I'm probably not going to do it. Like, I don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
Ironically, I joined the fucking military. Okay. So I finished boot camp and I go to job training school, to the Security Forces Academy in San Antonio, Texas. And I get there and the same thing. There was like none of my cadres there. I didn't really connect with any of them. And then I had this dude named Sergeant Thomas, who, he was just one of those guys. Picture like Matt Damon with a shaved head and just a lot more ripped. Like this dude was just a freak, and we would run. It was the worst when he was in charge of running formation runs, because we'd run like 10 miles. So it was a week before I graduated. And I remember every Sunday, we would have weekends off at that point. Every Sunday we would meet up on the drill pad for accountability. And the thing with Sergeant Thomas, I forgot to tell this part of the story. He made a connection with me about 2 weeks before training ended. And it was to what I said before. We were doing some training out in the field and I had to put my M249 machine gun back together. And as much as I'm a big advocate for the Second Amendment, I'm not a gun guy by nature. So I'm struggling to put this shit together. And here comes Sergeant Thomas looking all tough and like he's about to get on my ass and start screaming at me, telling me what to do. And I remember he just very calmly had his arms crossed and he comes over and he just kind of like slowly assesses like what's going on, what I'm doing wrong. And then he asked me a question. And he's like, Airman Gallo, what exactly are you doing here? And I was like, well, sir, I'm unsuccessfully putting together my M249. He's like, I could see that. Why do you think that is? And then I answered, and then he just asked like 10 questions in a row. And to the point where I got, I started to come up with the answers myself. And so he earned my respect. And so this is where the story gets really sad, unfortunately. So we're about a week from graduating. We show up for accountability on a Sunday night. We're all outside. And I remember we pulled up. I was dating this girl at the time. And we had just driven back on base. And everybody was already at the drill pad. Like an hour before we were supposed to be there. So right away, I'm thinking, are we late? Did we miss the time or whatever? So we get up there and everybody's crying. And Sergeant Thomas had killed himself that weekend. And I remember just being like, just shocked. Like that was the one guy who I looked up to, who I admired, the way he treated people, the way he taught. I learned a lot from him, and I had maybe 2 interactions with him because he's leading a whole team of 50 guys getting into the military. So he didn't have a lot of like intimate conversations, but you start thinking like, that guy looked like the strongest guy I ever met. And he was a badass in our career field, and he was a great teacher and good coach. And at the end of the day, you don't know what somebody's going through, so not everybody needs that firmness. Now there's times in training where, like, obviously with our career field, if you're teaching somebody how to handcuff or how to use their weapon, like, you got to be a little bit more aggressive, but 90% of the time, people just need somebody who's there to listen, to ask them the right questions. And
yeah. All right. So, yeah, I mean, like, definitely that's I mean, the story is obviously not great, but it was a good way to kind of like answer my non-question.
Yeah, sorry.
So
you said
I appreciate it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you said we had like 10 minutes left, and I was like, I could tell this in like listen, 2, and then I was like, that
story is obviously important to you, so I'm glad that you shared it on the show. But I do want to make sure that we talk about stuff that you're doing now, like, this minute, right? Or not right now, like not this minute exactly, but you're out recording a show right now. But just making sure that people know, like, kind of what you're up to, what you're doing, and ways that they can, if they do want to interact with you more, and if you're cool with that, ways that they can do that.
Sure. I appreciate that, Mike. So I'm actually a full-time business student right now. I don't know if I said that before, but I'm a junior at Rutgers, in Rutgers business program here in Lincroft, New Jersey. So in addition to doing that full-time, I'm still kind of playing around with the idea of being a business owner and a coach. And so I have a couple different projects lined up, I guess you would say. 2 of them are, one of them involves helping a friend of mine start his own podcast, which is going to be called Lift Yourself. And it's his own lifestyle brand. You can find them on Instagram. I think they're at Lift Yourself. And I'm really excited for that, because that's kind of what my whole mission has become about lately, is helping other people who are very impact driven, very set on inspiring other people in different ways, just helping them spread their message. And I'm also going to be doing another podcast with another military veteran who I think you guys might be interviewing. Are you guys interviewing Vince Ruiz?
Like,
Bill?
Literally, that's who's coming on right after you. That's who we're talking to. Yeah.
You guys are in for a treat. So Vince and I are actually starting a podcast next month, and we're still going back and forth on the name of it. But right now we're set on The Gift of Crazy. And I think it's very fitting. Vince is a therapist. He's actually about to finish his doctorates. And I'm just a dude who's a big advocate for mental health.
Yeah.
And so I think that whole dynamic of, I don't know if Vince is comfortable with me saying it, but like, he's my mentor, and in a similar way that Bill's been a mentor to me in this space, so another great thing I learned in the military is sometimes you need to know when to lead, when to follow, and when to get out of the way. And so I'm kind of following Vince's lead with this project, but it's going to be an interview format, and very similar to your own, Mike, where we're going to bring on different guests with interesting stories, and hopefully bring some positive insight to other people.
Yeah, awesome. I love that, and definitely let me know when it launches, because I would love to check it out for sure. But this has been great. So unfortunately, we have like a minute left, so we got to wrap it up. But I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing all that stuff, and then being a part of this whole overarching series that we've been putting together over the last, well, I mean, like this week mostly, but kind of what we're going to do for the rest of November as well. So I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah, I appreciate you, Mike, and thanks for everything you're doing. Not just with the podcast and promoting other business owners in New Jersey, but also with doing this whole series just for veterans. It's really cool, man. I'm really excited to listen to the other interviews.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, it was just kind of like Bill and I have talked about it. It was just like an idea I had one day, and I was like, who better to co-host these episodes with me than Bill? So Bill, thank you for co-hosting this episode with me.
You do all the heavy lifting, man.
Yeah,
Just like Joe said, I just get out of the way.
I love it. That's where
that was like an indirect way of telling Bill. Get out.
Yeah, get the hell out of the way. But no, this was fantastic. I really appreciate it. Definitely, if you have any links or whatever that you want me to send people to, just send those over. I'll make sure that they're in the show notes as well. So this has been the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. I'm Mike Hamm with my co-host Bill Anthes. We were here today with Joe Gallo, Air Force veteran. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.